welcome to the Mindset Michelle TV show. We're so super excited for you to be joining us for yet another incredible show. And today's amazing, wonderful guest is the lovely Helen Francis. Hello, Helen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
It's so lovely having you join us on the show today. And for those of you who aren't aware or have heard of Helen, she is the wonderful, wonderful owner and founder of Helen Francis Coaching. Now, she is an incredible leadership development coach who specializes in men and wellness and mental health. But before I go too far down that pathway, Helen, people will be fascinated how you came to the world of coaching, why you decided to work more in the area of mental health and men. So can you explain to us a little bit more about your background and how did you come to be doing what you're doing today?
Oh, definitely. So it really stems from my birth, all the way back there. So I was born out of an affair, and so I very early on found out about it, and being raised in the church, believed I shouldn't exist, and I wasn't allowed to talk about what was going on for me. So I developed anxiety and depression, and even suicidal tendencies, particularly as a teenager and moving into my early 20s. And I was very alone, felt very alone, and had a lot of loneliness in that space because I didn't feel I could talk to anybody. Um, I then went on this journey of self-discovery about 10, 11 years ago, and started doing some work on myself, particularly after another relationship didn't go the way that I had thought it should, or would, in the way that I had created it in my mind. And then I discovered NLP once my mum had passed away, and she was my only real immediate family that I had. And so again, the sense of loneliness and wanting that connection with others was very strong. I then went to Costa Rica at the start of 2020 and went through some plant medicine, which highlighted to me and guided me towards some sort of coaching, healing modality. Previous to that, I'd spent 20 years in admin for state governments. So came back because of COVID, and everything went online. So started my journey in learning to be a coach through NLP, Master NLP, doing the Enneagram personality structures, and moving into what's called Integral Plus coaching, which is really around the basis of integral theory and stages of development, and Ken Wilber and spiral dynamics work, which is really, really fascinating. And I could talk for hours on that. So that's sort of how I've come into that space, and had the opportunity to step into the coaching world from there on in.
Wow, and thank you, Helen. You describe so eloquently, and I love that word because you describe it with such an ease and flow. Yeah, I'm sure that you know that those years and those times of anxiety and depression and loneliness, kind of the stimulus for many parts of that journey you describe, um, would have been, you know, challenging at the time, but also giving you great skills, great life skills from there.
Definitely,
With
and
that,
it's taken a long time of practice to move through that, and to be where I am now. And a lot of self-abuse is what occurred really in my mind. I really abused myself, and who I was, and who I should be, and created all these stories in mind. And it's taken a lot of practice to be able to detach myself from that story, in a sense, so I can talk about it this way, and move into this space of contentment. And partly what moves me to work with in loneliness, around loneliness, is the sense that I want other people to understand that they're not alone, and that there is the opportunity to move through that, and not feel that sense of loneliness. whether you're surrounded by people or not surrounded by people.
Yeah, and I think that, even prior to COVID, this was one of the things that the big society and cultural based things that was really growing, unfortunately, that sense of loneliness. Given that you have done such an incredible amount of introspection and self work and plants in South America, and you've embarked on this incredible journey now of this coaching business using NLP as one of the cornerstones of it. What do you think then for you? What now is success for you? What does it mean to you now?
Now it's definitely shifted and changed for me. If you'd asked me even probably 5, 10 years ago, I would have said finding a partner, having children, for me was all I had wanted for a very long time, and to be successful. But in that sense, however, really now through the work I've done, I really, what I class as successful is the slowing down and the contentment of being in the present moment as it is and as it arises, and not attaching stories or constructs around what's arising, and just to be able to witness the process of life as it comes through, and really kind of work around that and work around um, taking more responsibility for myself, my thoughts, and the way I feel, and learning and really taking on those lessons around that we have full control over how we perceive and act and do and feel within the world.
And again, what a profound and fabulous way of expressing it, and so clearly as well. I love that, not attaching yourself to those stories, and it's such a profound insight and wonderful way of looking at what does success mean to you now. It is that peace and contentment and that slowing down and when I talk to people and they talk about being present in the moment, I don't always get that sense of recognizing that you need to slow down to recognize the
Mm.
moments, and that in that moment, it's not like there's great energy or bad energy or whatever energy. It's just that contentment because you're
It's
very
just, yeah,
present.
and it's there's it's not bad or good. It's just what it is in that moment, and detaching, and I'm definitely not 100% there. um, and it is a growth and development, and so for me it's the success is setting that intention to continue that growth and development, to be able to really let go of anything that's there that arises, or to the point where it no longer arises for me.
And what a wonderful segue into talking now about some of the suggestions and tips. You've obviously learnt how to let go and to become present and to not get drawn into the story, for example, but recognize that it's a story. So what are some of the suggestions you have for people where they can perhaps be catching themselves now? I'm feeling lonely, so I'm telling myself the story that, makes it like a real tragedy rather than in that moment I feel lonely. So what are some of the strategies and tips that you can give to people about how you perhaps have noticed these things, because it's human to have these feelings, but you've then gone, oh, it's a story, and caught yourself before kind of going down that path?
Um, there's so many things. I think the first thing is, if when embarking on this journey, to understand that is, one, be kind to yourself, because as one starts to notice these scenarios arising, there can be a tendency to then judge oneself and, oh, I've gone and done it again. I can't believe I've thought that. And that was something for me that I learned, had to learn, is that it's actually a good thing, and it may keep coming up, and it may appear like it's counterintuitive, like I'm doing this all the time. However, in order to move through it, one must have awareness of what's going on, and awareness of the stories, and the patterns of behavior around that and the beliefs and the values. So there has to become the awareness of around that. I
And I
think,
agree completely, because I think that becoming aware of that pattern and the awareness of what you're doing is definitely, for me and the work that we do with clients, the starting point. Becoming aware of who you are, what you're doing, and why you're doing it, and some of those underlying triggers or beliefs or thoughts that take you. I describe it as going down like a train track. You might have the initial thought or feeling, and then you head off on this train track, and you can end up way down the train track and not even recognize you're there. So coming back to that original starting point. Is that some sort of similar sorts of analogies that you've been using?
yes, there is. I mean, the ultimate element around all these stories is the meanings we make behind them, and then the meanings behind those meanings. And when you're exploring, you end up finding out what the actual core belief structures are, and and identifying what the personality structure is, and learning. I mean, that leads into the other thing of becoming aware that our personality and identity is also a construct, and it is changeable if one chooses. And so it's all around getting the awareness to then get the flexibility to have the choice to move in a
If
different direction. If and it's totally okay not to move in that direction. I think that's the other key thing is we having the choice, we can choose to still continue down that path, but having that awareness really helps with that, and taking on our responsibility for the four powers that we have, and the only four things we can control, which is what we say, what we do, what we feel, and what we think. And I think that's the one of the other big steps, is to really acknowledge that element, that that's all we can do. And that can be a little bit, that even that in itself can be quite difficult to take on board. I mean, probably the first time I heard that, I'm like, I can't control how I feel. I can't control how I think. And which comes back to that bit about slowing down, as well, because slowing down and giving ourselves that space, um, becomes helps in that space of growth.
Fabulous. And I wanted to ask you as well, how did you come to understand? Because I'm fascinated. We'll get to the say, do, feel, and think in a minute, but I'm really fascinated. How did you come to understand that your personality was a construct? That's quite a deep concept to really kind of recognize about yourself. So I'm fascinated what your journey was like in that.
It came through my coaching, instructors and coaches themselves, and development, and through the integral theory work as well. And it's it's easy enough a concept to grasp to a degree, but then embodying that element, and seeing those things playing out. And once, with the style of coaching, I'm going and digging deep to the point of finding that core belief structure that basically holds the whole identity and personality together. Once that's uncovered and comes to awareness, and I mean, it doesn't go away straight away. Definitely not if it's taken 40 years, 30 odd years to create it. And so it takes a bit of time. But once once coming back through coaching, and I mean, this is where for me, getting coaching and finding people to support you through this growth, to help be able to identify that. And so, having done the coaching classes, one of the things we had to do was actually coach ourselves and coach each other. And so, looking and bringing in, like, it might be a really minute topic and going, yeah, I could do that. And all of a sudden, we're back to the same thing, the same topic, which comes back to down, usually when we're a child, that gets stuck in place. And then it's just like, oh, okay, there it is again. And then and that's, yeah, and starting to see how the patterns play out, and utilizing things like how meta programs, which is what they're called in NLP, but also what we call cognitive biases, and seeing how they continuously play out, and how they play out in different scenarios, in different contexts. And so they're therefore being able to see them playing out, in those spaces kind of helps to work through going, oh, this isn't actually real. I can choose to do something else. It may, but again, you can choose to do the same thing. One of the ones that I run highly is care for others over care for myself. So I will do things and support other people to my own detriment, and seeing that playing out in amongst other programs, I'm like, okay, this is how I start to understand at times how I don't do the things that I would do for other people, such as supporting them to go to the gym or exercise or do things like that. Why I feel I need other people to create these things that I need, where instead of taking that responsibility for myself in that way. So that's sort of
Yeah.
seeing it keep coming up and up, and just starting to see the almost like the web of how it's made, and a bit like seeing how each of the bricks make a building.
And what a wonderful analogy, the web concept, or the bricks, how they make a building, and how they make your personality, which is what we're talking about. So I love how you started this was about being kind to yourself, because I think that as people do become more and more aware of their patterns and their behaviors and their reactions, when somebody says something or does something or feels something or thinks something around me, I react like X or Y. And sometimes even when you recognize it, it can be quite hard to shift it or to change it, because you can be quite attached to that position, that feeling, that sense of security for many people around. If somebody says this, then I believe that, and that's who I am, and nobody's going to change that, and nothing's going to change that. But recognizing that it's a construct, of the society, your family, or this or that,
Mm.
and that's where, when they talk about travel, one of the things they used to say about travel was how it broadens the mind. And I think that this is very true, because even in that sense, I remember as a younger person when I first started traveling, and it really, without even meaning to, started to challenge my construct about, what roles women played in work or in life or whatever. Um, what it meant to go to a bank. I remember years ago now, it was quite funny at the time, going to a bank in Ecuador, and the guy at the front door had this machine gun. And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? Like, our concept is you might have a security guard and some cameras, but here it's like, if you do something naughty, you could get shot by this machine gun. So all of these things that you kind of take for granted, but then make up the sum total. And I like that brick
Oh,
analogy of who you
definitely.
are.
Yeah, and definitely around personality, and in culture, in cultures as well. Quite often people will go, "Oh, this is a family trait. It's passed down. It's in my DNA." Well, it's enculturated through our shared understandings, through our modeling of our parents. And so as we model our parents, even subconsciously, these things become ingrained, even if they're not taught. And so, then it can come from multiple generations back. My great great grandmother made bread this way, and this is how it's done, and it creates this cultural element. And if people don't have that awareness that other cultures are different, that's when they get that shock of, oh, I'm going overseas, and this is how they're behaving. Like, I don't understand, or I'm dating this person from Europe, and I don't understand why they behave like this, or why their mother's around every day. And because it's just the enculturation of how their life has been shaped and formed as well, based on the culture and the people, social settings around them.
Yeah, I love, especially when you come back to culture and then the cultural norms, and especially around when working with people, we sometimes talk about this idea to do with wealth, because unknowingly many people carry around belief systems from their family and intergenerationally around wealth. And I always use the example of my dear, bless her, she's passed now, my grandmother in Scotland, who would say things like, only rich people eat at 7 o'clock, because in her life and for many, many years, way back to the serfs in those days, they would be getting up at the crack of dawn and going to work and having dinner, as we know it, about 5 p.m. in the evening. So to have dinner at 7 o'clock was like the landed gentry from, the kind of Edwardian times where, they sat down and had these great big meals and stuff. So understanding and again hearing that those beliefs have been carried down, and that's why my parents were the way they were, my families are the way they are. And again, it's not a judgment, it's just an understanding and unpacking that understanding that for that point in time, it actually made sense with the way that the social classes and systems were. But carrying it through into today and in today's modern society actually doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and this is a great lead into also why I have this bit of a passion to work with men, because women have done a lot of growth and development over the last 100 years or so, and um and they're now in the workforce and everything. And the enculturated belief for a lot of men have been that they are the provider and they provide for the family and they have this particular role. And so from what I'm hearing is from men is that there is this sense of lack of identity now with that, and particularly when in relationship breakdowns, they're no longer the provider. And they don't have they're unsure of what their role is. They're unsure how to show up for women, because women are able to provide for themselves now. And so these old in culture roles are no longer there, and men haven't been given they haven't been given, but the opportunity for men to have that growth and development hasn't been as big a push up in my perspective as for women. And it's starting to come into that way now. So this is where for me it's really important to help men to understand that they don't have to identify as the provider, as a particular thing. They can choose who they are and show up. They don't necessarily have to be in this one really strict hardline way. And I won't name any names, but they also don't have to be running around a fire embracing their sacred femininity. They can if they want to, but they have, again, it comes back down to having this choice, and that's and really helping men and supporting men in being able to show up in that way. And some of the other enculturated things that a lot of men, particularly in their 30s and above, from their parents, is that boys don't cry. Boys, you get up and you just keep going. And something I've been talking to quite a few men about is this sense that they have is like, everything will be right, everything will be right. And so they keep going because they believe everything will be okay. And then all of a sudden their world collapses. So there's this deeply enculturated sense that men are now realizing isn't actually, well, they're not necessarily realizing, but understanding that that's a construct in itself based from society, and that there is other options and choices, and it doesn't make them any less of a man. So,
And what a wonderful and profound, again, incredible way of looking at things and unpacking so beautifully where we started around, that the personality and the culture as a construct. And especially I agree, with men, there's this kind of renaissance of men questioning, who am I? What's my role? What is my role? What do I want my role to be? I also believe that with the growth of technology, it's something that the whole of society is going to be really questioning. If there's no jobs because the robots are all doing it as an extreme, what do I do with my life? And what do I want to do with my life? What do I choose to do? So we're actually at an interesting point in time where, yes, kind of this renaissance and opportunity for men and what do I want to do is happening at the same time that many of those traditional working roles are even disappearing, and
yes.
assumptions about work and working 5 days or working 4 days, or even everybody becoming part of the gig economy in some way. So all of those traditional concepts, which you so beautifully describe, are shifting. And Helen, I feel like we could talk on these subjects for many more hours.
I'm sure we could.
what's the best way for people to get hold of you if they're interested in finding out more?
I am on LinkedIn under Helen Francis. My website, I'm actually just going through a little bit of a rebrand at the moment. So my new business name is called Calibri Cura, which is spelt Kolibricura. And the reason that I've picked that name is Colibri means hummingbird in German and Danish and a few other European countries. And the hummingbird in Peruvian spirituality is the messenger between the earth and the heavens. Cura in Latin means care. So its meaning is basically the messenger of care, which is what I hope to be able to show and provide to people, that there is someone here who cares and is keen to see the support and growth of everyone.
And what an absolutely beautiful, beautiful name, Calibri Cura. And also so, again, profoundly deep in terms of the meaning behind the carefully crafted words. And so I wish you all the best with that change and brand and transition. The final part of today is actually, again, an interesting question. And I'd be fascinated, given what we've been talking about. If you were to give your younger self some advice, what do you think that the advice might be?
Um, I've written a couple of notes. So my favorite NLP presupposition that there is, and I say it almost all the time to people, is that there is no failure. There's only feedback. I think that would potentially have helped me. It's hard to say given my mindset at the time, but also just learning to accept where things are at in this present moment and learning acceptance. Um, and again, bringing it back to understanding that there are only the four things that you can control in your life: what you say, what you do, what you think, and what you feel. And to learn not to give that power over to other people by their behavior, and that it's all oneself. Yeah, so that's probably the several things, because I like to choose multiple things at once.
And
But
that's
I think the biggest
wonderful.
one is there is no failure, that there is only feedback is the biggest one for me. That yeah, there is no failure, and just go for it.
And when do you feel like, because I know a lot of time, and it's the same for myself, people we work with, you can kind of say things, but there's a moment where it actually clicks, and you know you get it. You kind of feel what you're saying, and it's no longer just your head. It's almost, it's your heart and the rest of you kind of catching up. When do you think you really got that there is no failure, there's only feedback?
Oh. I actually think it came at the start of last year when I had a relationship breakdown, and that was when I had quite a bit more transformational work in that space. And I was quite upset by how it had ended. And I remember being in bed for a couple of days, and instead of beating myself up about things, I just kept repeating over to myself, there is no failure, only feedback. There is no failure, only feedback. And then had coaching, started going, I'd done a lot of my studies, but was having coaching as well. And then from that, getting some really big feedback around how I had behaved within that relationship that caused these other um, reactions and things like that, and how I was attempting to, in all honesty, manipulate the scenario to get love and get love. It wasn't that I was necessarily doing evil things. Manipulation can be taken as a bad word, but it was a way. There was a manipulation of attempting to be proved that they love me and that they would come back to me. And so taking that on board has just, that's where it's like, it's kind of going, I didn't fail. It's like, this is the feedback. This is what I needed to know in order to take those next step in that next growth. So I think that's where it really probably solidified in a really tangible way for me.
And again, how absolutely beautifully you share, and thank you for sharing such a deep aha moment's another way of referring to it. But thank you so much for sharing. And I've been there with, don't call me, I'll call you from the bed kind of scenario. So good on you for chanting the mantra and really embodying that concept. And there is no failure, there is only feedback. And it's been, again, such an absolute pleasure having you on the show today, Helen.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you for having me.
And to all the viewers out there, we really, really appreciate all the amazing feedback we keep getting. And we love seeing your comments, and we enjoy presenting the show and sharing these tips and suggestions. And we love hearing how much they're making a difference to you in your life. So for now, from my heart to your heart, be great, be fabulous, and be you.